Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take stacks of information, often relating to complex and difficult subjects, and break them down to provide you with a detailed understanding in crucial context. Today we are undertaking a very serious and, I think, essential examination of a tragic event that really became a landmark case for digital safety and legislative reform here in Australia.
It really was.
Our focus is on the murder of Carly Ryan, a 15-year-old girl from Stirling, South Australia. Her life was cut short in 2007, and her death forced a national reckoning with the risks that were just emerging in the online world.
It did. And, this case eventually led to a significant legal framework that is now widely known as Carly's Law.
And this is really a foundational story for understanding modern digital vulnerability, isn't it?
Absolutely. The material we've examined documents that Carly Ryan's murder was Australia's first documented case of an internet homicide.
The first one.
The first one. A situation where an individual was killed by a predator they had met, exclusively through online channels. This event didn't just highlight this specific threat of child grooming, it brought the entire concept of malicious online identity deception, what we often call catfishing, right into the legal spotlight.
So our goal in this deep dive is to be meticulous, to be factual, and of course to be sympathetic. We're going to trace the entire sequence of events.
That's right. We'll start with the deception itself, which was sophisticated and went on for 18 months. Then we'll look at the anatomy of the crime and the investigation that followed.
And then finally, the monumental legal and charitable responses that came out of this tragedy.
Exactly. We'll begin by detailing the creation of this elaborate false persona that was used to lure Carly. Then we'll move into the crime itself, the forensic breakthroughs that led to the arrest.
And then we'll dedicate significant time to analyzing the work of the Carly Ryan Foundation and the intricacies of the state and federal laws that now bear her name. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Let's establish the timeline and the context for Carly herself.
Of course. Carly Ryan was born on January 31st, 1992. She was just 15 years old, and she was living with her mother, Sonia Ryan, in Stirling, South Australia.
And you have to put yourself in that time, the mid-2000s. For any parent, the digital landscape then presented these, completely unprecedented challenges.
Completely. And the time frame is so critical here because this deception played out over approximately 18 months.
18 months.
18 months. It started in an era where social media was still relatively new. Regulatory oversight was virtually non-existent. And that length of time really shows the calculated psychological effort that went into the grooming process.
And the sources are specific about the platforms used, right? It was very much of that moment.
It was. MySpace and a niche site called vampirefreaks.com. And these sites weren't just, social hubs. They were places where young people were exploring their identity, finding a community around very specific shared interests. In this case, music.
And that's what was exploited.
Exactly. That niche interest was exploited through the creation of a completely fabricated persona, Brendan Kane.
And the level of detail was convincing.
Incredibly convincing. He was pitched as an 18-year-old musician, supposedly born in Texas but living in Melbourne.
Which is a clever detail. It provides geographical distance, so there's an excuse not to meet right away.
Precisely. Far enough away to delay, but close enough within Australia to make a future physical meeting seem plausible. It's all part of the strategy.
And this wasn't just a static profile. The persona was actively maintained, wasn't it?
Oh, constantly. Because they supposedly shared these interests in music, the relationship developed, from Carly's perspective, very organically. It evolved into an intense online and telephone romance.
And that 18-month span gave the perpetrator just immense time to build trust.
Trust and emotional dependency. That's the foundation of effective grooming. The victim is drawn in by what feels like a shared passion, not just some random contact. But the sources make it clear that the goal here was never connection. It was control and, ultimately, access.
And we need to be very clear about who was behind Brendan Kane.
Yes. The true identity was Gary Francis Newman, a 50-year-old man from Melbourne, described in all the sources as a serial pedophile.
The psychological manipulation then reached its peak when Newman decided to transition this relationship from the digital world, the fantasy, into the physical world.
And he timed it perfectly, or so he thought, around Carly's 15th birthday in January of 2007.
The level of strategic thinking here is just chilling.
It is. He couldn't just show up as Brendan Kane, who was supposed to be 18, so he had to maintain the fiction. He introduced another layer of deceit.
He came as Shane.
He came as Shane, traveling from Melbourne and presenting himself as Kane's father.
And the pretense for this visit, according to the sources, was, it was deeply disturbing.
Very. He claimed he was delivering birthday gifts on behalf of Brandon. And these were not casual gifts. The sources list items like lingerie and a nurse's outfit.
Clearly designed to push boundaries.
To push boundaries and escalate the nature of the relationship, absolutely. And tragically, Carly's mother, Sonia Ryan, was operating under the assumption that this man, Shane, was the father of her daughter's 18-year-old boyfriend.
So she initially allowed him to attend the birthday party.
She did. He was even allowed to stay overnight at their home. And this is just a moment of absolute vulnerability that you see in the sources, highlighting that gap between an online identity and a parent's awareness.
But that veneer of Shane cracked almost immediately.
It did. Newman, it seems, was unable to maintain the appropriate distance. His behavior at the party is described in the sources as becoming increasingly erratic and possessive.
And these weren't just subtle red flags. They became overt, deeply concerning.
Extremely. The sources detail one specific incident where Newman was discovered lying on Carly's bed while she was sleeping in it.
Which is an undeniable violation.
An undeniable violation of trust, of personal space. And that act served as the immediate breaking point.
So Sonia Ryan, her mother, intervened at that point.
Instantly. She was now fully alert to the danger this individual represented. She asked Newman to leave the very next morning. And critically, the sources note that she then began monitoring her daughter's internet usage much more closely.
But the damage was done.
The damage was done. While it was a massive step toward protecting her daughter, those 18 months of emotional grooming had already established a powerful, dangerous psychological hold.
And that hold proved incredibly difficult to sever.
It did. The transition from fantasy to reality had been set in motion, and the momentum of this deception was now just rolling forward.
It's that psychological manipulation that makes this so important to understand. This wasn't a random encounter. It was an 18-month investment in creating a false reality.
And the moment that reality was physically challenged by Carly's mother, the perpetrator's true possessiveness just came roaring to the surface.
That psychological momentum, tragically, carried over into the next few weeks.
It did. It overrode the mother's protective measures. Despite Sonia Ryan's heightened vigilance, the final fatal encounter occurred just a short time later.
The sources state that Carly left her house on February 19, 2007.
Yes. The explanation she gave was that she was going to a sleepover with friends.
A common, seemingly innocuous teenage activity.
Exactly. But it was used here as a tragic cover for meeting the man she still believed was connected to Brandon Kane.
The search concluded the next morning, February 20th.
It did, at Horseshoe Bay in Port Elliot. Carly's body was discovered floating face down in shallow water. The sources describe her body as battered and disheveled.
And attempts to revive her at the scene failed.
Tragically, yes. They were unsuccessful.
The forensic details that were documented, they're critical to understanding the brutality of this attack.
They are absolutely essential. The autopsy confirmed an extreme level of violence. A total of 19 separate, distinct injuries.
19.
Including 6 to 8 severe blows to the head.
So the official cause of death wasn't simple.
No, it was a complex, multifaceted assault. The determination was a combination of facial trauma, smothering, and drowning.
Which indicates a prolonged struggle.
A prolonged and dynamic struggle, yes.
Uh.
Furthermore, the forensic teams found cannabinoids in Carly's bloodstream, and very specific to the location, they found beach sand in her esophagus.
That detail about the sand? It paints a horrifying picture.
It does. It suggests that the final moments of the attack were sustained, likely happening right at the water's edge or in the shallow water itself.
With the victim struggling, taking in sand and water before succumbing.
That's what the evidence points to. A violent confrontation, not a quick act. So, moving swiftly, the investigation focused on tracking Carly's movements and the individuals she was last seen with.
And there was security footage.
There was. It placed Carly in and around Port Elliot on the evening of February 19th, accompanied by 2 men. Witnesses corroborated this, saying they last saw her alive at the beach at approximately 9:30 p.m.
The breakthrough, according to the sources we've reviewed, it hinged on a tangible piece of evidence.
It did. It was the identification of a specific pale blue vehicle used by the 2 men. This clue was invaluable. It allowed the police to track the individuals across state lines to the Mornington Peninsula in Victoria.
And 11 days after the murder.
11 days after, law enforcement closed in. Gary Francis Heumann was apprehended. His younger son was also detained at that time as he had been present at the scene.
But it was the subsequent search of Newman's computer that provided a truly terrifying insight into the scope of his predation.
It really did. It moved the case beyond a singular homicide. The sources report that at the very moment of his arrest, Newman was still actively logged in and maintaining the fake Kane identity on his computer.
So the game was still ongoing for him.
Even after the murder, it speaks volumes about his pathology. But what truly amplified the urgency for legislative change was the discovery of a private notebook he kept.
And this wasn't just a diary.
Not at all. This notebook meticulously detailed some 200 distinct online personas.
200. That number is just staggering.
It is. It confirms this wasn't a spontaneous crime. It was the result of years of systemic, calculated predation. The sources document that this notebook detailed numerous other criminal attempts at grooming, targeting individuals both within Australia and across international borders.
And that realization that the murderer was this sophisticated, serial digital operator, that was the moment the case changed.
It changed from a local tragedy into a national security issue regarding online safety. It proved that the digital realm provided the infrastructure for predators to operate at a scale that was just unprecedented.
And that scale necessitated a new legal response.
A legal response that had to account for this kind of networked criminality.
The legal proceedings began shortly after. They ran for a lengthy period, from October 2009 to April 2010.
Yes, and the sources note that Newman's conduct during the trial was erratic. He tried to maintain the facade, initially denying that he had ever even met the teenager.
But the evidence was overwhelming.
Completely. He was found guilty of murder and was sentenced on January 21st, 2010 to life imprisonment.
With a substantial non-parole period.
A 29-year non-parole period, yes.
Now, what about the other individual who was detained? Newman's adopted son. He was a minor at the time and a witness to the killing.
He was cleared of all charges. The material we have focuses the guilt solely on Newman. Because he was a minor and potentially a victim of Newman's own manipulations or coercion, his identity remains suppressed by the court.
Which is a common legal protection.
It is. It's to safeguard the child's future and ensure the focus remains squarely on the perpetrator of the violent crime.
So the investigation and the trial's conclusion in 2010 solidified this national realization. The Australian legal framework had a critical, dangerous gap.
A massive gap. The existing laws were simply not equipped to address this kind of online deception and grooming that crossed over into real-world harm. And that tragic vulnerability became the undeniable catalyst for change.
And the most immediate and powerful response came from Carly's mother, Sonia Ryan.
It did. Instead of succumbing entirely to private grief, she channeled her energy into public action. In 2010, the same year Newman was sentenced, she established the Carly Ryan Foundation, or CRF.
A nonprofit charity.
Yes, created with a singular, crucial mission, promoting internet safety and awareness for Australian children and families.
And the CRF rapidly matured into a major advocacy force.
It really did. The sources highlight that beginning in 2013, the foundation started these intense lobbying efforts, targeting legislative bodies and pushing for specific legal changes to protect minors online.
And their efforts were backed up by some pretty persuasive statistics.
Very persuasive. The foundation frequently cited data indicating that 25% of Australian teenagers were being contacted online by people they did not know.
1 in 4.
1 in 4. And that statistic moved the conversation beyond the singular tragedy of Carly Ryan. It established that this risk was pervasive, affecting a quarter of the entire teenage population.
It showed that while the outcome of Carly's experience was tragic and extreme, the underlying activity stranger contact was a common digital experience for Australian youth.
And that underscored the necessity of immediate intervention.
The Foundation's initiatives weren't just limited to lobbying, though. They were proactive in education and providing practical tools.
That's right. Their outreach expanded awareness efforts not just across Australia and New Zealand, but it gained international attention. The sources confirm that Foundation representatives even attended U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee hearings in Washington, D.C.,
highlighting the global nature of this threat.
Exactly.
So what specific tools did the Foundation promote to bridge that gap between online activity and physical safety?
They focused on transparency and control. For instance, they heavily promoted the use of online contracts.
Online contracts, what are those?
They were structured agreements designed to facilitate clear, non-confrontational communication between parents and children about safe online behavior.
So it's about setting rules together.
Exactly. These contracts would typically outline rules about screen time, acceptable online spaces, and critically strict guidelines on disclosing identity, and most importantly, the absolute prohibition of agreeing to meet someone from online without explicit parental involvement.
That shifts the dynamic, doesn't it? From policing to more of a partnership.
It gives families a framework to navigate this new environment together. And furthermore, the Foundation recognized the need for technology solutions to combat technology-enabled risk. They invested resources into creating a personal safety smartphone app for children.
And that app was called Thread.
That's right, Thread.
Can you elaborate on how it worked?
Well, while the specific features evolve over time, the core function, as described in the sources, was real-time personal safety monitoring. This usually involves things like GPS tracking that parents can access, panic buttons, automated check-in systems.
So it's a digital safety net.
Precisely. It enables children to communicate quickly if they feel unsafe, and it gives parents tools to know the physical whereabouts of their children. This directly addresses the vulnerability of a minor leaving home under false pretenses, just as Carly did.
Sonia Ryan's tireless dedication has, deservedly, received immense public recognition.
It has. In 2013, she received the prestigious South Australian of the Year award for her services to the community.
And her advocacy continued to be recognized.
Oh, yes. She received various other significant awards in 2017 and 2018 for her role as a safety crusader. And most recently, in 2021, she was honored with an OAM, an Order of Australia Medal.
And for those who might be unfamiliar with the Australian honor system, what does receiving an OAM signify?
The Order of Australia Medal is one of the nation's highest civilian honors. It's reserved for individuals who have demonstrated outstanding achievement or service to the community.
So in Sonia Ryan's case, it cements her legacy.
It cements her legacy not just as a grieving mother, but as a critical figure who successfully mobilized public opinion and political will to enact fundamental changes in federal law, effectively protecting future generations of children.
The sustained advocacy of Sonia Ryan and the CRF ultimately resulted in that crucial legislative change.
It did. But the path to enacting Carly's law was, well, it was challenging. It required a lot of persistence. The sources confirm that early legislative proposals introduced by the team of then-Senator Nick Xenophon were initially unsuccessful.
That really illustrates the difficulty, doesn't it? Translating a horrific but singular event into complex national law, especially when you're dealing with abstract digital concepts like identity.
It's very difficult. The turning point was the sheer persistence and the detailed groundwork laid by the Foundation. And coupled with that was the growing realization that the existing criminal code was simply not adequate.
It couldn't charge someone for the specific acts of digital deception.
Exactly. Not for the planning stages. We needed a federal law that criminalized the preparation for the act, not just the attempted or completed assault.
And the ultimate success came at the federal level first.
It did. On May 25, 2017, the Criminal Code Amendment, Protecting Minors Online, Bill 2017, was officially submitted to the Parliament of Australia.
And this bill is where the crucial legal ingenuity lies.
It is. To ensure the law was robust and adaptable, it centered the new offense around a specific legal concept, the carriage service.
That technical definition is essential for understanding the law's reach. The bill defined a carriage service as a service for carrying communications by means of guided and or unguided electromagnetic energy.
And the true insight here is how forward-looking and technology agnostic that term is.
Right. It isn't tied to specific platforms. It doesn't say email or MySpace.
Yeah, no. By defining the offense around the mechanism of communication, the transfer of electromagnetic energy, it effectively future-proofed the law. This definition legally captures every form of modern communication: telephones, video chats, computers, the entire internet.
And even future digital spaces we haven't thought of yet.
Anything that relies on that energy transfer, virtual reality environments, you name it.
So the core offense created by the federal law was precise. It criminalized using a carriage service to prepare or plan to cause harm to, procure, or engage in sexual activity with a person under 16.
And this brought us directly to the act that defined Carly's murder: the malicious use of online identity deception. The sources explicitly state that the federal law criminalized a person misrepresenting their age online as part of a plan to cause harm to another person under 16.
And that provision is the entire point of Carly's law. It legally codifies the deception as a crime in itself when it's linked to malicious intent.
It closed the loophole that Newman had exploited. Absolutely. But to fully integrate this new offense into Australia's legal structure, the bill needed to amend not just one, but three distinct federal acts.
Okay, let's unpack that. Which three federal laws needed amendment, and why was that necessary?
The three laws were the Criminal Code Act 1995, the Crimes Act 1914, and the Telecommunications Interception and Access Act 1979.
Okay, so starting with the Criminal Code Act 1995, that's where the new offense would actually be housed, correct?
Precisely. The Criminal Code Act is the core federal legislation that defines offenses and penalties. This is where the specific language creating the new offense, criminalizing the preparation to cause harm via a carriage service, was inserted. It established the crime itself.
And the Crimes Act 1914, that often relates more to procedural and enforcement powers.
Yes. The Crimes Act 1914 covers general matters like powers of arrest, search, and investigation for federal offenses. Amending this act ensured that law enforcement had the necessary legal tools and authorities to investigate this new class of digital crime.
So without those amendments, police would have a defined crime, but maybe not enough power to execute the search warrants needed to seize computers and digital evidence.
That's exactly right, which are central to these cases.
And finally, the Telecommunications Interception and Access Act, 1979. That sounds like it directly pertains to the police's power to monitor the very carriage services used for the crime.
That is the essential legal connection. This act regulates when and how law enforcement can lawfully intercept or access telecommunications content. By amending this specific act, the government granted police the power to legally intercept or access communications related to these new offenses.
And that was a crucial step.
Crucial. Because without it, the digital evidence, like the communications between the perpetrator and the victim, might have been inadmissible in court. The amendment legally recognized that identity deception coupled with intent to harm was serious enough to warrant interception powers.
So the law was comprehensive. It didn't just define the crime, but also granted the necessary investigative tools to prosecute it.
Yes, and the amended bill was successfully enacted into federal law on June 23, 2017.
But that was the national federal scope. The sources also detail a separate but equally important legal battle at the state level in South Australia.
Yes, which was where Carly lived and where the crime culminated.
So why was a separate state law necessary when a federal law was already in place?
Well, this often happens in federal systems. While the federal law established a very high bar preparation or planning to cause harm, the advocates in South Australia sought a law that targeted the preliminary step of the grooming process more directly.
And the journey there was also difficult.
Very. A similar bill had initially failed in the Legislative Council back in 2013.
But the sustained advocacy of Sonia Ryan and the Foundation kept the pressure on.
Absolutely. Following a massive petition drive and continued lobbying, Attorney General Vicky Chapman introduced an amended bill. This version successfully passed the Parliament of South Australia on July 5, 2018.
What was the specific offense created by the South Australian state law, and how did it differ from the federal one?
The state law created an offense tailored to that final step of identity deception, the one that precedes the physical encounter. It made it an offense for an adult, defined as 18 or older, to lie to a child about their age or who they are, and then subsequently attempt to meet that child.
That distinction is key. The federal law focuses on the ultimate malicious intent planning to cause harm.
Right.
But the state law focuses on a lower threshold. The Deceptive Act combined with the planning of a physical meeting.
Precisely. It targets the attempted transition from online fantasy to physical reality. It allows for prosecution at an earlier stage in the grooming cycle. It makes it easier for law enforcement to intervene before harm is realized.
Even if proof of intent to cause harm, which must be harder to prove than a meeting attempt, is still being gathered.
Exactly. And these South Australian state amendments officially came into effect shortly thereafter on August 13th, 2018.
So the legal legacy of this case is really defined by a powerful 1-2 punch. A forward-looking federal law targeting high-level criminal intent across all digital services.
Supported by a state law targeting the immediate deceptive precursor event in the grooming process, the false identity used to secure a physical meeting.
We have completed a detailed journey that began with an unprecedented tragic act of internet homicide and concluded with a coordinated, multi-level legislative response.
And the murder of Carly Ryan really did expose the catastrophic failure of existing laws to recognize and prosecute malicious digital identity deception.
The successful passage of Carly's law at both the federal and state levels represents a crucial turning point. It achieved what seemed impossible. It bridged that gap between the virtual construct of an online identity and the very real consequences of physical harm.
It established clear criminal boundaries where previously predators like Newman operated with a kind of impunity in a digital gray area.
And the significance of this case extends far beyond Australia's borders. It demonstrated that modern communication technologies require bespoke legal frameworks.
Frameworks that are future-proofed, as we saw with the use of the carriage service definition, the federal law criminalizing preparation via this service, and the state law targeting the deceptive physical meeting. Together, they establish a legal safety net designed specifically for the era of digital natives.
And the driving force behind every political step, every amendment, and every successful piece of legislation was the Carly Ryan Foundation, spearheaded by Sonia Ryan.
Her relentless advocacy ensured that her daughter's tragedy became the impetus for permanent, protective legal changes that safeguard future generations. The laws that bear Carly's name are a testament to the fact that persistence can indeed translate deep personal pain into lasting public good.
We have seen how lying about one's age online, when that deception is connected to malicious intent, was finally defined and established as a specific criminal offense, moving the law beyond the limitations of older statutes. This whole discussion, examining the complex relationship between digital identity deception and real-world safety, raises an important question for you to consider.
In a world where digital identities are increasingly fluid and constructed, and where platforms profit from user engagement, how much direct responsibility should online platforms and social media companies bear in actively helping to enforce the real-world protections established by laws like Carly's Law? Should they be required to implement specific verification measures or content monitoring that assists law enforcement in prosecuting identity deception offenses?